So, today's book review is going to be an interesting one for a myriad of reasons. Not the least of which is because I couldn't stand this book the first time I read it, but I recently joined a book club, and wouldn't you know, the very first book that we do is... Hold on. This Is Where It Ends by Marieke Nijkamp. I read this book initially because of the subject matter. We all know I'm super weird and I don't mind reading really heavy topics. So when I came across a book involving a school shooting, I said, I'm with it. My biggest problem is I never quite understood the shooter's motivation, or not that I didn't understand, I just didn't buy his motivation. And then on this reread, I could not connect with a single character. And I was so nervous going into this book club because we all know I can talk. I can support a book club all by myself. That's practically what I do here. I was so worried that I was going to get into this book club and everybody was going to disagree with me. As much as I love doing this, it hasn't taken off as quickly or at all as I would have preferred. We all have delusions of grandeur, and I just figured, oh yeah, everybody's gonna want to jump on board with me. Well, you haven't. It's not like I have any of you guys saying, yeah, I agree with what you say, or no, I hate what you say. And so yeah, I was going into this book club thinking, I don't know anybody in it, and now I have to bring my opinions to the table on a book that I couldn't stand twice over. We'll get into more of that later. The book, as I said, it deals with school shooting. It is told from multiple narrative perspectives. We have Claire, Autumn, Sylvia, and Tomas. Sylvia and Tomas are brother and sister, or actually they're twins. I mean, yes, they're brother and sister, but they're twins. Sylvia and Autumn are girlfriends, and then the shooter is Ty, and that is Autumn's brother. And he used to date Claire. So they're all intermingled. They all have their perspectives of the story to tell, which I don't mind. I like multiple narratives. But my problem with what they did was I thought Claire's perspective was completely unnecessary. When the school shooting starts, she is actually part of the track team, and the track team is practicing when it happens, which, let me get a little bit into the plot here, or a little bit into the plot summary. The event takes place during a school assembly. This school requires everybody to be at the school assembly except the track team? Nijkamp is Dutch. So I'm wondering if some of this is because they do things differently in Holland when it comes to their schools, or if she's so far removed from school that she forgets the little things, or if because she just wants to make it that much more suspenseful, she forgets about the ancillary employees in a school. Maybe all of the teachers and all of the administrative staff are in this assembly. What about the kitchen staff? You know, like the cafeteria workers. Does this school only have one janitor? Do they really only have one security guard? And so if everybody, including the kitchen staff and the security guards and the janitors, are required to be at this assembly, why is the track team exempt? Anyways, I don't mind that there are multiple narrators, but I thought that they prevented the story from fully developing. They prevented us from, or prevented me from connecting with all the characters because there was just so much going on. Plot though, plot. We start with Claire running around the track. Then we switch over to Sylvia and or Autumn, who are in the auditorium listening to the principal give her spiel. And then a shooter walks in. Well, really, the assembly ends, everybody's trying to leave, but for some reason no one can. And that is when Ty enters the picture, and it turns out that he's locked all the doors. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems that the school was built around the auditorium, which is another problem that I had. Because isn't that a fire hazard? Isn't that a safety hazard? If the only exits are back into the school. So if there's a fire in this school and everybody's in the auditorium, then they're stuck in the auditorium. From what I gathered, the school's built around the auditorium. All Ty had to do was padlock all of the exterior doors except for one, which is what he used to get in, and then he had another student lock that one. Meanwhile, Tomas, who's like the school bad boy, he and his fellow school bad boy are breaking into the principal's office, which is another thing of mine. So this assembly, it's taking place around 10. The shooting starts at 10. Technically, this whole book takes place within an hour. Tomas, he has issues with Ty. He got himself in trouble so that he would be sent to the principal's office so that he could break into the principal's office during the assembly so that he could look at Ty's student records because, and we're going to get a little bit ahead of ourselves, Ty and Autumn's mother had died. I guess the dad had issues before she died, but after she died, the issues increase in that he drinks more, he's more physically abusive. Ty also gets angry. I mean, he acts as a shield for Autumn, but then he has nobody to shield him. So he's going through all this stuff at home, and then he feels like so many people abandoned him, and then one day we're getting so far ahead of ourselves. I'm getting so far ahead of us, but as I said, Autumn and Sylvia are girlfriends. Ty has an issue with this. He feels like Sylvia has corrupted his sister, so he assaults her at a school dance. Tomas comes to the rescue, bashes Ty's head against the locker. Also, Claire dumps him because of how he treated Sylvia. So from this point on, he's like, I'm not going back to school. But on this particular day, he is supposed to be coming back. So Tomas is trying to get access to his records so he can figure out what's going on. The issue there is, if everybody is required to be at this assembly, except for the track team, why are Tomas and Farid exempt? Except for perhaps nobody knew they didn't show up because they got sent, or at least Tomas got sent to the principal before the assembly and then hid as everybody went to the assembly. The impression I got sent to the principal's office just for him to have to wait through the assembly. So those two are outside of the auditorium, as are the track team. None of the track team members have cell phones. Their coach is supposed to have one, except he's so technologically behind that he never has it with him, which I need to double check this. It was written in 2016, or it was published in 2016, meaning it was probably written like 2013, 2014. From what I can tell, we don't get a clear distinction as to what period this takes place. My whole point is technology has sped up in the last decade or two. I could understand early 2000s, maybe, because we didn't have smartphones in the early 2000s. The first iPhone had barely just come out. There was not this whole internet thing and all this access. And so maybe if this book had taken place then, I could understand their track coach not having a phone. But there's Twitter. Twitter happened in 2006. So this book happened at least after 2006, and I'm assuming it took a while to catch on. So I'm assuming this book is really recent because there are tweets that occur within the book. So if you think about it, The fact that the coach doesn't carry a phone with him does not make sense. Because my dad, who is almost 70, is attached to his phone and plays games all the time on his phone. So how prehistoric is this track coach to not carry the phone that he's supposed to have for safety reasons? But that's the deal, is the track team, nobody has access to a phone. So Claire and her best friend Matt, who is her love interest, if you can't catch on that quickly, decide to run to town. They never make it to town because the students inside the school do have their phones with them. And that makes me believe this really is taking place much closer to present day. Because when I was in school, we had cell phones, but we were not allowed to use them. You got in major trouble for having a phone at school. These kids obviously don't suffer the same affliction, which it wasn't really affliction for us because phones were that new. It was like 20 cents a text. I mean, it was so expensive, okay? The kids in the school, they're tweeting, they're calling parents, they're calling the police. So Claire and Matt never even make it to town. They get picked up in a police car, but before they leave school grounds, they find the dead body of the school security guard, which in my opinion is one of the saddest moments of this book, because even though it's really weird that Claire eats lunch or like hangs out in his police car, you do get the sense that he's an all right guy. And did he really need to die? Ty is inside the school and he's just shooting people. He really doesn't care who dies, although you get the sense, and this was probably me also projecting what I remember were his motives, but you get the sense that all he wants is one thing, and as soon as he gets that thing, nobody else has to die. And the thing is essentially Autumn. Not only did their mother die and their dad started abusing him, and then because of their dad's issues, the town then abandons both of them plus their father, which I don't understand that either. Granted, where I live isn't as small as it used to be, and yes, it was very exclusive when I moved here. People did not readily accept you. There was quite the gossip mill. Everybody knew everybody's business. But I just can't see the town rejecting the children for the sins of the father. He is now upset with Autumn because Autumn is a dancer. She's a ballet dancer. She wants to go off to Juilliard. She just wants to get out of, what is it called? Opportunity. And they live in Opportunity, Alabama. Their dad has been discouraging this because that's what her mother was a dancer. The whole mother thing is an issue all of its own, but she ends up dying. And here's a spoiler. I thought it was going to be a lot more interesting than it really was. But she essentially falls asleep at the wheel because she's been out of town, out of the country, doing her dance thing. So she's been back in town, and I guess she's so busy that when she goes to pick up Autumn at dance class, she falls asleep at the wheel and dies. Not only is the father not happy about Autumn wanting to continue along the path that the mother had been on, but Ty feels like she's abandoning him because she's leaving him behind for a bigger and better life. On top of that, she's being corrupted by a homosexual relationship. All he wants is for Autumn to come up on stage and, I don't know, like, I guess agree not to leave. That's never really clarified because you get the sense that Ty is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs at this point, so it doesn't really matter what she does, but he wants her to come talk to him. Okay, so this cracks me up. First, I'm irritated, actually, and then I get cracked up because when he first enters, everybody is freaking out. Sylvia is freaking out to an extent. Tomas and Farid are freaking out. The track team is freaking out. But Autumn's just like, she's completely calm. It's like, oh yeah, that's my brother. It's my brother with a gun. That's my brother killing people. She has no reaction, which maybe that could be a little bit of shock. but I really had a hard time buying the way that she initially reacted. And then so this is what makes me giggle, is she essentially like crawls up to the stage. Part of what got me so confused when I read this was, in my school, the assemblies took place in the gym. And so we have those bleachers that push in and out of the wall. So this is what I'm imagining she's doing, is like slithering down these stairs. It's like, how in the world did he not see her? When in reality, it's more of that auditorium setup where you have the stage and things are dark and you have the carpeted floors, and they're not really stairs. There's just an incline or a decline, whichever way you're going. But I was just like, because as I said, this book takes place in an hour. Holy cow, did it take her forever to get to the front of the stage. I'm like, I think there's like 1,000 kids, only because of so many surrounding areas that are feeding into it. Like, it's such a small town that they have far reaching. So I guess it could have been a decently sized auditorium, but oh my gosh. I was like, I get it. We're trying to prolong things, but can we please hurry up, because I'm sick and tired of Autumn being on the floor. Eventually, she does get up on stage with him. He taunts her and he's like, dance for me. He shoots people, and for me, this was the most successful part of the book. I didn't consider the book to be successful as a whole, but if I really dig deep to find something, because writing is hard, if I'm digging deep to find something to commend Nijkamp on, it is that you hated every time he shot that gun. You hated every time somebody got hurt or died. You hated his callousness. Tomas and Farid, they find a pair of bolt cutters and they're able to open up 2 of the doors. So people are leaving the auditorium. This kind of gets a little bit wonky for me, probably because it was midnight and I was reading a book I didn't like, and so I wasn't paying as much attention as I could have. But somehow people get out. Sylvia, who is fearing for Autumn's life, because he shoots at Autumn, but he doesn't actually hit Autumn. But Sylvia realizes that she is kind of his main target, and she says, I'm gonna go up and confront him. Somehow in this mass confusion, Autumn escapes, but then Sylvia is unable to escape, and she, Tomas, and Farid run deeper into the school. Ty follows them. The thing about the school is, I guess, the teachers are supposed to lock their doors when they're not there, but Tomas knows of one room that will not be locked because he had blown up the lock. They are attempting to escape through a window, but Tomas decides to sacrifice himself. I really should reread that part, but for me, it was kind of senseless. I want to say he thought that by giving himself up, perhaps Ty would not go after Sylvia. So the deal with Tomas is he wants to buy them time. So he sacrifices himself and he dies. Claire comes back into the school. She confronts Ty, and then he shoots her in the knee, which is kind of the best way to end her dance career. So yes, you win. You win, Ty. And then Ty kills himself. That's where the book ends. Back to Sylvia and Ty. I thought there was a huge missed opportunity in this novel, because from the very beginning, we realize that something terrible has happened between the two. It's pretty obvious what that terrible thing is gonna be, but I like to give people a chance, and maybe she's not gonna go the route I think she's gonna go, but she did. If you haven't put those pieces together, it means that Ty raped Sylvia. And that is only problematic because we don't get nearly enough of that for that to be the end result. We know that she is deathly afraid of him. We know that he assaulted her at the dance. We know that he accosted her at another time. But we don't really know when the rape happened. And another woman in the book group pointed out something valid. And that is someone with her level of fear and someone who has told nobody about what happened, somebody who has obviously not processed the event, she flipped a switch awfully quickly when she went to confront Ty. I don't have a problem with us peeling back the layers of her fear of him. I don't mind seeing that his abuse of her started small and ended big. But my problem is that we're expecting something big. All we get are small things, and then bam, we get big, and then we move on. Has nobody read Speak? Hello? That book has been out for how many decades? There are so many books that revolve around the subject of rape that I don't think there would have been a problem with Nijkamp making that a bigger part of the novel. But I think so much of that goes back to too much is happening. Claire didn't need her. I think because we did not get Ty's perspective, she was sort of the person to give it to us, and she was the one intended to humanize him. But so much of her narrative was about discovering her feelings for Matt and ruining her relationship with Ty and blaming herself. That is a huge pet peeve of mine. And that is something that every single character in this book does, is they blame themselves for certain circumstances in their lives. It was all about her romance with Matt, or her unrealized feelings for him and the lack of realization of his feelings for her, remembering her relationship with Ty and thinking, how could I have prevented this? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And then running down the road. I'm just saying, if I thought Autumn crawling across the floor took forever, her jog with Matt was like harrowing, okay? This circles back to the lack of development of all the characters because of how much was going on. Every single character had the heaviest storyline. They all had demons to deal with. They all had skeletons in their closet. You know, it may have been YA in name. It may have been YA in age, but it was not YA in execution. None of these characters had a YA voice. They all felt like adults in a teenager's body. We have the abusive father. We have the dead mother. We have Moss and Sylvia's mother, who is suffering from Alzheimer's. I think they only have their abuelo left, so then they have the dead mother. We have Claire, whose sister has gone off to war, and her dealing with, how do I feel about that, and do I want to follow in her footsteps? And we also have her brother, who, maybe her brother's Matt? Hold on. I had it wrong. Matt is Claire's brother. Chris is her love interest. But then we have Matt, who suffers from lupus. So then we have all the issues surrounding him. We have Fareed, who is Middle Eastern, and he is an outcast in Opportunity, or at least Opportunity High School, because of his nationality. We have the guilt that Claire carries around because she blames herself for her mother's death. And then we have Ty coming from this saying, oh, everybody hates me, nobody loves me, blah, blah, blah. And we obviously have the Autumn-Sylvia relationship, which in a small town like Opportunity, Alabama, isn't acceptable. So now we have this thing that they're hiding, and then they're both dealing with their demons because Sylvia apparently has everything going for her and can go to any school she wants, but because of the rape, I'm assuming it was the rape, she is pulled back, and now she's thinking Autumn's the only thing keeping me afloat. And then we have Autumn basically thinking the same thing about Sylvia, where she's like, we have all these plans, but she really has no idea how much she means to me, and without her I'd be nothing, and my mother and my dance and my brother and my father, and is so heavy. And there's not one lick, actually that's not true, there's one instance in this whole entire book in which a character felt like a teenager, and that was Tomas. When he was getting people out of the auditorium, he goes to rescue his crush. And he's like, well, maybe if I rescue her, she'll go out on a date with me. But other than that, they felt far too mature. This is stuff that I, as a 30-year-old, or not 30, a little bit older than 30, would be reading. And this is something that my parents would be reading. This all just goes back to lack of character development, lack of connectivity with characters. I found myself not really caring about Autumn and Sylvia's relationship. Like, I didn't care about the stakes because they had no chemistry for me. I saw none of the beginnings of their relationship. We saw none of the, I think I like someone who is the same sex as me, or I already knew this was the kind of person I was, but I had to try to hide it, or I didn't really know how to deal with it. But now, and this is my best friend, I don't even know how they started out. We got basically the first date, when it wasn't really a first date, but they went to a show together. And who was it? Sylvia, Autumn, one of them took that next step and held the other one's hand. And then we kept moving forward. Ty, honestly, was the only one that I connected with or felt sympathy for, because he seemed to have no support whatsoever. Not condoning how he dealt with it, but he's being physically abused by his dad. His mother is gone. His sister is leaving. The town has shunned him. His girlfriend broke up with him. For a good reason, granted. You should never hurt another person. He had been picked on constantly. I don't know if it's because he was just kind of a weird dude, or if it was because of what was going on with his home life and the way that his dad was getting them ostracized. He had this perfect storm of reasons to lose his mind. Yet he's the bad guy. And yes, he's the bad guy, but I could see where he was coming from. That's my point. I saw what drove him to do what he did. I thought it was a bit convoluted. And honestly, my first read through, the one thing that I took away from it was Ty decided to shoot up school because he didn't like his girlfriend being a lesbian. And to me, I thought that was a little unsubstantiated. This reread, obviously, I saw there was more to his issues, to his motivation. But still, as much as I saw more of him, I also felt like there was a lot of him that was lacking. And Tomas, I kept waiting for a reason why he and Ty didn't like each other, because it wasn't just what Ty was doing to Sylvia, because essentially Tomas knew nothing about it. But for some reason, they didn't get along, and I wanted to know why. What was the basis of that? Was there something deeper, or did Tomas just know that Ty picked on his sister, and so he wanted to stand up for her? And then Claire, we have this great subplot of her sister going off to war. And it was completely, they just dropped it. It was incredibly important for her first 2 or 3 scenes, chapters, whatever you want to call them. Because they weren't really chapters. We just went from person to person. Basically, once she and Chris try to run into town, the whole joining the army thing gets dropped. Why bring that up if you're not going to go anywhere with it? Like, it felt like it was going to be a bigger issue. But I thought pretty soon Claire decided, don't want to go this route, and I don't understand why I felt I had to. All I needed was Chris to tell me I'm good enough without it. 'Cause I thought it was good tension, not only because that is something, I think she's a junior, she might be a senior. I thought it was good tension because juniors and seniors, that's what they are doing. They are figuring out what is their next step. Are they gonna go to college? Are they not gonna go to college? Are they gonna enlist? So her battle with that felt natural. Except nothing happened. So who's Claire? Except that she didn't realize she was in love with her best friend. The mother, Autumn and Ty's mother. I thought that subplot was underwhelming. I was expecting, and I'd already read the book, but obviously I forgot. I was expecting something so much bigger. Something that Autumn really could have carried with her. Something that really did make her feel like she was to blame. If this town is really as small as it's painted to be, she couldn't have walked to dance class. She couldn't have gotten Ty to drive her or her dad to drive her. She couldn't have gotten Sylvia's grandmother or anybody else to take her. Or if the problem was needing to come home, she couldn't have gotten her teacher to take her home. She couldn't have found another way home. Her mom just like falls asleep at the wheel. I'm not making light of that, okay? It's serious business. But for the buildup that we get, again, suffers from underdevelopment. With that in mind, the mother, oh no, there's a spider, and I have nothing to kill it with. Whew, having a rough time of it, but we are moving on. The mother, was she constantly going to Europe because that's where the best dance opportunities were, or was she going to escape her husband? I don't quite know when all of the abuse started, when his alcoholism really became a problem. Like, was it a problem beforehand and was just exacerbated in the aftermath of her death? Or was he an alcoholic, like a functioning alcoholic, and she said, I don't want to be part of this. Yet she would leave her children in that situation. Underdevelopment, underdevelopment, underdevelopment. That is what this book suffered from. And I cannot figure out why it has such high reviews. I was terrified that I was going to step into this book club and everybody was going to disagree with me because so many people love it. Well, there's 6, 7 of us. None of us liked it. Even with Matt and his lupus, a number of the women got the impression that he also had a mental disability, that he felt really young. My thought was all of his interests are just coping mechanisms because lupus can be painful. One of the women also researched lupus, and apparently it's more impactful on a female. And so why did Nijkamp choose a boy? Or even apparently Nijkamp has her own disabilities, and her story is incredibly interesting. So much so that it's more interesting than the disability that she gave the one character. Which reminds me, Ty apparently is a really good shot. So he has no problem killing people that he intends to kill. But then there are moments where he shoots just to shoot. Ultimately, Matt gets hit. I guess there's a spray of bullets that effectively hits Matt. I'm thinking in the chest because Autumn keeps talking about how the blood is soaking through his shirt. It's fatal enough to kill him, but it's not obvious enough for him to know he got shot. Again, just one more thing that I don't understand. We don't even see him getting shot. I can only assume that it was just one of those instances where Ty was shooting for the sake of shooting and not because he was planning on hitting anybody. And that is such a big deal because Claire is constantly worried about him. We keep getting these text message and tweets and whatnot about him trying to get in touch with Claire, and then he dies and we don't even know he's been hit. This book took place in under an hour, and it took about that long for the police to show up. Even if the people on Twitter thought that these tweets were fake news, it's the police's job to believe a caller requesting assistance. It is their job to respond. No matter what, it's their job to believe the caller when the caller says something's wrong. Yet, they never even make it inside the school. The kids make it out. Fareed and Tomas get them out of the auditorium basically around the same time that the police show up. After Ty has left the auditorium, the police come in and they say, "We are here for anybody who is not wounded. If you are wounded, we're leaving you behind." And I was like, I don't know police protocol. And I understand it's the concept of let's get you out if you can get out. We don't want to waste time. But Autumn is sitting with Matt, who is dying. And the police or the SWAT, whoever it is, won't give the time of day to pick Matt up and carry him outside. Okay, that makes sense. That is it. And this is where it ends. I can't believe I sat through it a second time. I'm glad that I did not invest money in getting the audiobook. I was close to it. I requested this book at the library probably a week in advance, maybe 2 weeks in advance, and it wasn't available until either on my app or at the physical location until 4 or 5 days. This one I think I got 5 days before, and then I got the library notification 2 days before. So it's like, yeah, I'm glad that I didn't just bite that bullet and buy the audiobook. So there we go. This is where it ends. I don't recommend it. Please don't waste your time. If you want a school shooting book, go to That's Not What Happened by Cody Keplinger. A much better representation of a school shooting, much better characters. There we go. Hope to see you next time. Bye.